All right, it is week 10. That's right, 10 in the college football season. We have got you covered here on a college football kickoff show powered by WagerTalk.com. We got 5 big games coming up in this week 10 slate we're going to break down for you. And it'll include, of course, the game everyone's going to be interested in the Big Ten, Ohio State and Penn State. We'll mix in a little SEC. And, of course, we'll do it with the service academies up first. And what better way to kick off than with Air Force and Army and Ralph Michaels in the house, ready to roll. Nothing like getting a little service academy getting over what? What in the world kind of number is that? I get it. Air Force is down, Ralph, but it's still service academies, isn't it? This feels like an awful lot of points to be given even Air Force at 22 right now. What are you thinking?
Yeah, well, what a difference a year makes. Remember last year, let's go back less than 12 months ago. Air Force was 8-0, ranked number 17 in the country, and they were an 18.5-point favorite to an Army team that was 2-6. So what happened? Army pulled the upset as an 18.5-point dog, winning 23-3. Almost the exact same role reversal later. We also have to mention every time we do a service academy, the over-unders going back since 1995, 11 overs, 43 unders, and 1 push. That is 79.6% to the under. But I did break down the Navy Air Force game earlier this year, and I said it felt like a different dynamic because Navy threw the ball so much more, and that game did go over. So the first Service Academy game this season did go over. 34-7 was the final score with a total of 37.5. So it still only went over by 3.5 points. You know, when I look back at the series, Joe, and you were shocked, like I said, last year, the dog was a 17.5-point underdog. They pulled the upset. The dog in this series has now covered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 straight games, and 10 straight games have gone under the total. Now, normally, the reason for the unders is simple. Army, Navy, and Air Force all basically used to play the option offense. They knew the option well. They knew how to defend the option. And they played against the option multiple times a year and every day in practice. But the offenses did have to change a little bit a few years ago with the cut blocking rules, where we've seen Navy pass the ball a lot more, and even Army. Army has 55 pass attempts. Air Force this year has 90 plus pass attempts as well. So, you know, the problem with the Air Force passing is their leading quarterback, Busha, only 36.7% completions and a 1-5 ratio, where you have the Army quarterback in Daly, 59% completions and a 7-0 ratio. So the teams are much closer than their records indicate, basically because of the quarterback play. I am going to say this. You know, Air Force beat an FCS foe week 1, Merrimack, no big deal. Every other game since, they've only scored 7, 3, 19 against Wyoming, 7. They did score 37 against New Mexico, but that was in a 15-point loss. And then they scored 13 last week against Colorado State. I actually do lean with the under here, and I like under first half a little bit more. Air Force is going to be desperate. I think they're going to try a few trick plays and try to get on the scoreboard. So I agree with you, Joe. I think this is a little too high for a desperate team against a Army team that is now rated and having to play with a little bit pressure, thinking, well, if we win out, we got a shot to get to the playoffs. Even though they're cadets and their mental might be stronger than most players, it still is pressure for the teams. Lean under, and if I had to take a swig at the side, I would go with Air Force.
Leaning toward, that's a ton of points. So, though it is kind of funny, Ralph, how Air Force was kind of in that position Army's in, right? Rolling into that game last year, undefeated, I think. They were 7-0. And, boy, they got absolutely smacked as Army was terrible. So, roles reversed, a lot of points. Big total in a service academy game. Should be very interesting to see if Army, who has played absolutely nobody to this point, can keep it rolling in that one. Don't forget, if you're joining us here for the first time, welcome in to the College Football Kickoff Show. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, become part of that Wager Talk TV family. And if you are joining us live, you got a question about any one of these Week 10 games, drop them in the live chat or in the comments on the replay, and we will address them here as we get ready to welcome in Drew Martin. And boy, the largest tailgate, Drew, happening once again, is it not, up in Jacksonville, as Florida taking on Georgia. This is always such an interesting game, one that usually doesn't end well for Gator fans. And it's still, again, a pretty big number here, Drew, taking on Georgia. That was a big game for Georgia against Texas. Do we trust them to win by margin here against Florida coming up?
You know what, Joe? I don't. I mean, doing a little cocktail in here, world's largest outdoor cocktail party. I'll tell you, Joe, yeah, they got that big win against Texas, but Georgia just hasn't been covering numbers. I mean, flat out. They're 0-5 against the spread. Their last 5 is a favorite, 2-7 ATS, their last 7 dating back to last season. And don't look now, but the Florida Gators, they've covered 4 straight by almost 60 against the spread points. So the odds makers have really been underpricing the Gators. We get Billy Napier. He won last time off of a bye by double digits against UCF, whereas off of a bye, Kirby Smart last time, he lost his last one, his last bye week. So yeah, I don't think it's that big of an advantage towards Kirby Smart. Overall, Joe, I actually think plus the points here with the Gators is the way to look in the cocktail party.
I don't, that's a ton of parts. Plus you got, Napier. Man, he's like a bad rash. You just can't get rid of him, man. I mean, they're trying in Florida all they can to get rid of him, and he just won't be going anywhere, Drew. It's a big number. I mean, let's face it, no way around it. Georgia, man, I'm not running to the window on a neutral site game there to be laying that many points against what should be a pretty good defensive effort by the University of Florida. I agree with you. Bryan Power in the house. Welcome in. And of course, you're going to head to the Big Ten, it appears. And I don't understand. This line has been absolutely out of control with Minnesota and Illinois. Illinois got absolutely boat raced with Oregon last week. They're hurt left and right, but they're home. And they were a 3-point favorite, I believe. Now they're a 3-point dog. That's a 6-point swing here for PJ Fleck on the road as a favorite. What are we doing, BP?
Well, look, I always like to mention when we've got an unranked home favorite against the top 25 team. Well, in this instance, Joe, as you teed it up, we've got an unranked road favorite going on our hands against the top 25 team. Not sure if Ralph has any data on how often that transpires, but it's certainly interesting. And look, this past week, and you talk about this Illinois team, okay? I was on last call with Kelly, and I said straight up, the Fighting Illini are a fraud. They got blown out by Oregon, sure enough, 38-9. Pretty telling there, Joe. Again, a theme of this breakdown is going to be the odds makers are telling you what they think of this Illini team, okay? And last week, I said it was telling you we had a spread of over 3 touchdowns. Sure enough, they were non-competitive against the Ducks. Now, I know Illinois' only 2 losses are to top 5 teams, Oregon last week and then Penn State earlier in the year. And technically, guys, they do have 3 wins over ranked opponents, but those 3 wins were Kansas, Nebraska, Michigan. None of those teams are ranked anymore. And you can make the case, I think, that Illinois got lucky in the wins over Kansas and Nebraska. Sort of stole them late. Even when they beat Michigan, the Illini were outgained in that game. And oh, by the way, you talk about stinky lines. Let's look back. Illinois here at home closed +5 against Michigan, who, as you know, Joe, Michigan stinks. They're running a bad service academy style offense. I mean, that again, the odds make. I know Illinois won the game, but they were outgained. And it sure says something if you're +5 at home against Michigan, at least in 2024. Illinois should have been beaten by more against Penn State. That final margin should have been bigger. They gave up 49 to Purdue. Needed a 2-point conversion in overtime to win that game. So now that I've established I have no interest in the Illinois side, let's talk about Minnesota. 48-23 win last week over Maryland. Most points in a Big Ten game since before COVID. They even, for the first time this season, scored a touchdown on the opening drive. Max Brosmer, the quarterback, transfer from New Hampshire. He's playing well, guys. He had a season-high 4 touchdown passes against Maryland. And Minnesota can run the ball, too, okay? Darius Taylor averaging 4.5 yards after contact. Quite frankly, I don't think the Illinois run defense is any good, Joe. There are several metrics that back me up there. And this Minnesota defense, second most interceptions in the country with 13, only 5 touchdown passes allowed. This is a big game for Fleck. He's 0-3 straight up and against the number versus Bielema, despite going off as the favorite all 3 times. 4th time will be the charm. I will defy my own power ratings here. I would lay it with the Gophers. Don't hate the under here either.
Yeah, I can't see this being some sort of wild shootout, but I mean, Bielema, I can't think of anybody worse at home in Big Ten play. No, I mean, the guy has been an absolute sieve. I believe 5-11 in conference play at home, 8-15-1 against the number. I mean, this at Illinois, Illinois has never been a good team to back at home for some reason with Bielema. And isn't their season pretty much over at this point? They're not making a run at the Big Ten title, right? So what the hell's left for Illinois?
Look, and they're bowl eligible already. Full candor, there is no team in the country I was more wrong about win total-wise. I thought Illinois was not going to be bowl eligible this year. They already are. Now, to be fair, I also said Indiana over 5.5 wins. They've already done that too. Mm-hmm. So, but Illinois, look, Joe, the odds makers are telling you what they think about this team each and every week. They don't respect them.
Yep.
They were +5 against Michigan at home. Have you watched Michigan play? Michigan is horrific. And they outgained Illinois in a 21-7 loss. So, I don't know. I think Minnesota is the better team and the deserved favorite, despite what the computers may say.
Brosmer, I mean, who'd have thunk it? A New Hampshire quarterback is actually starting to come into his own in this one here. So that huge line move on the games here today that we're going to be talking about, certainly in that game with Minnesota and Illinois. Do want to remind you guys, of course, all 3 of these gentlemen, Ralph Michaels, Drew Martin, as well as Bryan Power, lock loaded, ready to go here this week on their pages over at WagerTalk.com. And of course, hit that subscribe button, that like button, become part of the WagerTalk TV family as we get ready to roundtable a couple of huge games coming up in this Week 10 slate. One in the SEC, another one in the Big Ten, which will involve, of course, Ohio State and Penn State. And if you have a game you'd like us to discuss or a question, drop them in the chat room. If you're joining us live, drop it in the comment section. If you're watching this on replay, as we're going to head, Arkansas again at home, catching a touchdown or more. This time, Ole Miss. I can't think of a more profitable coach than Sam Pittman in this spot. Now, usually Arkansas is playing a night game here, Ralph, catching points this year, but this is a noon kickoff. So I would imagine 11 a.m. there in Arkansas. Ole Miss, boy, 6-2 sitting right now. Laying a touchdown or more, Ralph. Isn't it always been a good time to back Arkansas at home in this spot, catching points with Pittman? Oh, am I supposed to mime him? Are you muted, Ralph? I could always. There you go.
I did. I had the cough. My apologies. And I'm getting old. I can't remember that I turned off the microphone before I coughed, and then I got to turn it back on. But I'll leave a note next time. Mm-hmm. Arkansas, a different team than we've seen in the past. If you think of the Arkansas Hogs, you think of that rush attack, and going back to who? Peyton. In those days. And now they're a pass-happy team. I mean, yes, they ran 37 times against Mississippi State, but that's because they didn't have to pass. They ran for 359 yards. In the previous games, LSU passed 31, rushed 19. Texas A&M passed 41, rushed 30 times. Oklahoma State, 46 and 47. And you look at Arkansas and you go, wow. Remember that Oklahoma State game, Joe? We talked about that, week 2. And Oklahoma State, I think, was a 7-point favorite. And Arkansas looked like they should have been a 21-point favorite. Mm-hmm. It fell apart late. They were minus 3 or 4 turnovers in that game, but they still finished with a 263-yard edge. And then the LSU game, they were minus 3 turnovers. In the A&M game, they were -3 turnovers. So their losses, even though they are to LSU and A&M and Oklahoma State, are clearly because of turnovers, and they actually looked like the better team on the field. Now, Ole Miss, people say, oh, you look at Ole Miss and they have 2 losses, and this is really an elimination game, so whoever loses this has no shot at the SEC title. Not that either team might get there anyway, but listen to these numbers for Ole Miss. They have played the 11th toughest schedule in the country. They're number 2 in yards per game diff. They're number 1 in yards per play diff. They're number 2 in points per game diff. And when you look at yards per play on the season, they're number 2 on offense and number 3 on defense. You look at that stat profile, and they should be a bigger favorite. But again, the red zone, the penalties, they've had a lot of penalty issues, which has killed their drives. So statistically, they've played well, but you look at their last 4 games. Kentucky, they lose 20-17. South Carolina, they do win that game, 27-3. They were plus turnovers in that game. LSU, they lose by 3. And then Oklahoma, boy, the LSU game almost lost them 2 games in a row as they struggled against Oklahoma early. And then, boy, Lane Kiffin opened up the defense last week. And in the second half, they had 9 sacks. They finished with 10 sacks in the game and an incredible defensive point. So I went to the database. You look at teams like Arkansas that are off an away win that they covered, and they scored 52 or more points. That's it. That's the only parameters. You played your last game on the road, you won and covered, and you scored more than 52 points. Those teams like Arkansas, 41-14, 74.5% against the spread. And when you have a conference home team as a dog or a small favorite that lost the last meeting as an away dog the previous season, and they won their last game as an away favorite, those teams 65.2% against the spread. And in that system, an interesting subset, only 3 overs and 20 unders. That is 87% to the under. Ole Miss is going to run the ball. Arkansas is early going to decide whether to run or pass. Ole Miss defense, pass defense, only allowing 57%. But I think with Ole Miss getting 5 sacks against Kentucky, 6 sacks against South Carolina, 10 sacks against Oklahoma, Sam Pittman is not going to want Green to sit back in the pocket and get eaten alive. They're going to want to establish the run. Ole Miss is going to run the ball under first half for me.
Under in the first half for Ralph. Arkansas, by the way, 10-1 against the number, 4 straight covers against Ole Miss. And Drew, the home team has won the last 5 games in this series. Pittman, 21-9 against the number as an underdog. A touchdown, and it was 8, as high as 8 yesterday, and it's actually starting to come down. What are you thinking of this game here?
Yeah, Joe, all great points. I mean, sidewise, I would lean with Arkansas, but I go total, and I agree with a lot of what Ralph said. I'll add on, this Ole Miss team, it seems to be kind of like the same thing each and every year, Joe. They come out, Lane Kiffin, all around, guns blazing, scoring points, 70 points week 1, and then they get into SEC competition, and the offense doesn't look the same. They don't move the ball the same. So therefore, I kind of pumped the brakes on betting Ole Miss to the over. In Arkansas, yeah, they scored a bunch against Mississippi State, but a lot of teams score a bunch against Mississippi State. Ralph touched on that. If they have to throw the football, which I think they will here in the underdog role, I don't think they move the ball as well. They're just, you make good points in terms of, as a dog, Sam Pittman, and I don't disagree with you, Joe, but when you watch Arkansas play, I've watched them a bunch for whatever reason against Oklahoma State, against Auburn. If Auburn could just not throw the ball to the other team, I think they would have won that game. Outside of that, they really don't have a lot of good wins under their belt. The Tennessee game, yes, but that was more defensively. So I don't trust this Arkansas offense to move the ball through the air. Therefore, I actually had circled here under 54, which was popping up. So it kind of correlates with what Ralph was talking about in the first half, but I'll take the full game under here, Joe.
Looking at a full game under in this one. It should be noted they didn't have their leading receiver, I believe, Jaquinda Jackson last week, but Pittman says he'll be back this week. But quite honestly, Ole Miss didn't have their number one wide receiver, Trey Harris, either last week against OU, Brian Powers. So no word on whether he's going to be a go here. But, man, watching that Oklahoma game against Ole Miss last night, they were down, 14-10 at one point in that game. And a lot of people about Ole Miss were sweating in a big way last week. What changes here, if anything, against Arkansas?
Yeah, that was not an impressive performance at all against a bad Oklahoma team, or at least bad by Oklahoma standards. This is a tricky spot, too. We should mention Ole Miss has Georgia on deck. That's also going to be in Oxford. And you mentioned the troubling trend, at least one of the troubling trends, Joe, the 1-10 ATS record Ole Miss has against Arkansas. Here's another troubling trend if you're an Ole Miss backer. Underdogs in SEC games this season, 26-11 against the spread. That is easily the most profitable mark in any conference in America. But man, and Ralph touched on this, based on the statistics, you look at just Ole Miss on a spreadsheet, sheet of paper, whatever. It is tough not to fall in love with this defense. They went into that OU game, number one in the country against the run, number one in the country by a wide margin in tackles for loss, and number one in the country in PBUs. That's passes broken up. I know Arkansas has got that big win over Tennessee. They played A&M tough. They should have beaten Oklahoma State, Joe. And then they hung 52 on Mississippi State last week. But two areas of concern for the Hogs. One is going to be protecting Taylon Green, okay, because I ran through the Ole Miss defensive profile earlier. And then two, defensively, Arkansas, their secondary is not very good. So I could actually see Jackson Dart possibly having a big day. And then there's this, the Lane train as road chalk, 14-2 straight up and 11-4 and 1 against the number. You look back under Kiffin, Ole Miss, when do they lose? It's when they face the top teams. They're going to lose next week to Georgia, I would imagine. But I see them winning here. I would probably lay it if I was forced to. I think the defense rules the day, and I would co-sign with both of these gentlemen. I had to say I would play the under if I was betting the total as well.
53.5 is what we're seeing there. 7, the current number with Ole Miss taking on Arkansas. Don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you're new to us here at Wager Talk TV, we've got one other big game coming up that we are going to break down for you, and none better than Ohio State and Penn State. But a couple of interesting comments in the chat room I wanted to get to. And again, if you have a game and you're joining us here live, drop them in the chat. We'll get to a few of these here as soon as we're done. And of course, you can always drop them in the comment section if you're rewatching us here. And we will be monitoring the chat, of course, straight up until kickoff here on Saturday. We'll get back to you with any questions you may have. We are interested, I guess. Jim writes, how the hell is there no Saturday kickoff after 8 o'clock Eastern time? I believe we're turning the clocks back this week. Are we not, BP? I believe it's daylight, right? So what are we, gaining an hour or something along those lines on Saturday?
I always get confused by that. I'll ask my wife, I'm sure, on Saturday, and I'll be at a party. So hopefully that means an hour more of partying when we're watching
That's
games.
Correct.
But,
yes.
Yes. So,
but there won't be any late games.
No, and which is a problem. There will be nothing to watch after that. So I don't know. I guess none of the teams out west. I mean, Washington's playing USC, but that's a 7:30 Eastern start. I don't know. I did see that, and I don't know if it is daylight savings related or what. Usually they have at least 2 games, but I guess no Pac-12, after dark anymore, right?
Nothing, right? Ralph, what the hell's going on? What are you going to do in Vegas now that you got nothing to watch after 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock? I mean, what is going on? Is this happen every year? Are we missing it that right around this time of year we get none of these late games, or is this all because of the readjusting of all the conferences here?
Well, Joe, it actually goes back an hour, so the kids have more time in the morning to go to school, so it's lighter earlier. So now it's going to get dark at 4 o'clock at night. So the clocks go back in the fall. Spring ahead, fall back. So that's my timetable lesson for you. But I think really it's this. It's the TV dollars and the Pac-12 breaking up where when the West Coast teams are playing the East Coast teams, they want them on an East Coast time zone.
Yep.
So, even though the USC is playing Washington, those teams are now playing the Big Ten fans, Big Ten recruits, so they want them on Big Ten time. So I think that's the reason. Hawaii's not home, and a couple of the West Coast teams that don't have the big crowds don't want to play those night games. They get more crowds in the day. You have those family weekends. You have the homecoming weekend. So I think it's just a combination of all of them.
Oh, good point, Ralph. No games starting after 8 o'clock on Saturday in this week 10 of the college football slate, but a lot starting at noon, including the game of the week here between a couple of top 5 teams. Ohio State taking on Penn State in this one. Happy Valley will be the spot. And let's face it, I mean, everyone knows Penn State and James Franklin have a difficult time beating Ohio State. It's been a minute since that has happened. However, what in the hell has happened to the Ohio State running game? Has anybody seen it? Been looking on the back of milk cartons for it because they can't run the damn ball, Ralph, which means, you know what? We got to rely on Will Howard and that arm on the road. Eesh. Don't know that I trust all of that, but the number is hovering right around, 3.5 right now. I don't think there's any doubt Ohio State certainly very capable of winning this game on the road. I mean, they've done it often here against Franklin and Penn State, but I don't know. We still don't know if Alar's going. Is the backup worry you for Penn State? How do you approach this game?
Well, one thing that Franklin does is he always plays his backup quarterbacks during the regular season, almost more than any team. So we saw what I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but Prabula did last week after coming in. I think he's 11 of 13 because he's been in that spot. He had thrown 10 passes. He had been in 3 other games. And there's a big difference to have your backup quarterbacks ready. So that is one thing I like about James Franklin. But, granted, both of these teams and coaches have tremendous pressure on them. For Ohio State, is this an elimination game? Maybe not, because I'm sure the committee can say, we want the Ohio State fans there, and you have an Ohio State team that lost to the AP number 1 and the AP number 2 on the road. Penn State, we'll see what happens. But more importantly, I think these coaches have pressure on them for the situations. As bad as they looked against Nebraska after losing to Oregon, I mean, Ryan Day is on the hot seat. I mean, clearly, you look at what they've done in the bowls, you look at what he's done against Michigan. If he loses this game against Penn State, we don't know what's going to happen with the Buckeye alum. And you had mentioned Penn State, so I did pull, James Franklin can't beat Ohio State. James Franklin can't beat Michigan. He has that exact same pressure in this situation. I did pull up Penn State against AP top 10 teams. And when you exclude games as a dog of 16 or more, back when they were bad a few years ago, James Franklin against top 10 teams, 0-14 straight up, average loss by 15 points per game, 2-12 against the spread, failing to cover by 8 points per game. And he has lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He has gone 0-8 ATS his last 8 games. The last time he covered was 2017 against Ohio State and 2018 against Ohio State, where Penn State was also a top 10 team. So, I mean, they've proven they can keep it close when they are also ranked. I actually make Penn State a 2-point favorite in this game, but I can't get to the window with Penn State with Drew Aller questionable. Your question on Ohio State, Joe? It's the offensive line. They are likely down to their 3rd string left tackle. You just saw him got eaten up last week before Nebraska when he got hurt. Then they brought over the left guard to tackle and put him in a brand new position. So they are going to have a mismatch O-line, which, as you said, is going to be an issue to have what people thought the best running back room in college football, one of the best college football running back rooms in the history, having those 2 players. And while they're averaging, 188 yards and 5.4 yards per carry, the last 4 weeks, they're only averaging 4.2 yards per carry. And against Nebraska, 64 yards, 2.1 yards per carry. I'm going to go under. And again, like I often do with unders, I do like the first half unders more. And I am going to go under first half. This is a feel out game. This is both teams trying to establish the run because, yes, they need the run. You know, Penn State started off the season rushing for 222, 244, 309, and 239. They rushed for 239 against a good Illinois defense, but that rush attack has also gotten gone with a couple O-line changes as well. So 2 O-lines that aren't 100%, 2 prideful teams, a lot to play for with a national championship hopes on deck. Under first half for me in this early Big Ten noon matchup.
Yeah, noon kickoff. Happy Valley under in the first half. And Drew, it certainly feels like this is Penn State's best shot to beat Ohio State in a long time. I mean, it's all about matchups. And if Ohio State can't run the ball and has to be one-dimensional against that defense of Penn State at home, I don't care who's playing quarterback for Penn State. They have an opportunity to win this game in front of the home team. The question is, will they do it? Because it's been a hot minute since they've been able to. So what do you think we're going to get here?
Yeah, it really has, Joe. Only one win since, 2012? So this has been a one-sided series. Both teams this season, Joe, kind of similar profiles, winning games, 6-1 for Ohio State, 7-0 for Penn State, but ATS, they're not really covering numbers, kind of pointing towards maybe being a little bit overpriced, particularly on the Ohio State side. What last week against Nebraska, going off as 25-point favorites, only winning the game by 4 points. And something Ralph touched on is the offensive line injuries. Their left tackle Simmons, great player. He goes out, backup out. Or at least questionable, and it really is starting to show up in their offensive numbers. So it makes me look towards Penn State, but then the question marks, with Penn State and the Nittany Lions quarterback, is he going to play in Allard? And if he doesn't, then that brings in question marks on that side as well. So I like Penn State. There's still 3 and a hook out there, but I need confirmation that he's going to play, Joe. So, man, it's just a tough one. Great way to start off Saturday. If Allard plays, I do like Penn State here, plus the 3 in the hook.
I mean, it does feel like it's going to be BP. Which defense can get a stop late? Because I don't know that there's a lot separating these two teams, but I'll say this. I think the game means way more to Ohio State than it does Penn State. Penn State at least has a little bit of room for error, but you can't be Ohio State, lose to Oregon, and then lose to Penn State. I mean, 2, top 10 teams, obviously, but my goodness, Ohio State, what are we doing here? It feels more important to Ohio State than it does to Penn State, but I'm not sure Ohio State has the horses this year to beat them in Happy Valley. What about you?
Yeah, look, I don't think a 1-point loss at Oregon is the end of the world. Obviously, Oregon, the number 1 ranked team in the country. Now a second loss would be terrible for Ohio State. They still really have not beaten anyone of note. Off a bye, they sleepwalked their way to the win over Nebraska last week. So I guess, look, to echo what all these guys said, we're going to find out whether or not the Buckeyes are a legit national title contender this week. The thing is, my power ratings, I still have them right near the top. I thought they deserved to be favorites at Oregon. I think they deserve to be favorites here. Let's not forget, you look at the Penn State side, guys. They struggled against Bowling Green. They were down double digits to USC. They trailed Wisconsin at the half last week. We have not seen James Franklin yet with that shameless attempt to run up the score, really going back to the Kent State game. Why? Because they haven't been in position to run up the score, Penn State. So you mentioned the numbers against Ohio State, Joe. 7 straight losses, 3 of those here in Happy Valley. 6 straight losses straight up in the home dog role for Penn State as well. I don't really care if Allard is a go or not for Penn State. I don't understand why scouts think he's going to be a good pro. I watch him. He just misses. There was Ohio State against Ohio State last year. He stunk. He stunk against Michigan last year. Give me the luck, guys. I'll lay the points here. I think they win.
Laying the points here with Ohio State. There you go. We got first half under. We got lean towards Penn State. We got Ohio State. How's that for absolute confusion for Penn State and Ohio State? Should be a fun one, though, and see how it probably comes down to the defense making a pick 6 or something late in this game. Looking forward to that one. Also got a couple of games here in the chat room that we'll go over. And again, if you're joining us live and you got a question about a game, drop it in the chat room or in the comment section on the rewatch, and we'll go ahead and answer those questions for you. And the ACC seems to be getting some interesting games coming up this week. One of them is going to be Louisville and Clemson. Some questions in there. And Ralph, I'll go to you. Clemson just seems to be, after that loss to Georgia, boy, I don't know, it's switch, flip, offense, they don't care. Like, my goodness. They have been a wrecking ball ever since. Now, they don't get Miami this year, but Louisville, I gave Miami a good run, but Miami, when you drop in, 40, 50 points a game, which I think Clemson is very capable of doing, how much faith do you have in Louisville's defense to be able to slow Clemson down?
Yeah, I don't. And, I talked to Bryan Leonard back a couple weeks ago, and his wife's a huge Clemson fan. And I said, I really kicked myself because Dabo's one of those coaches that doesn't lie. After the Georgia game, he said, listen, guys, we are a talented team. We played a crappy game. We will just show you how good we are for the next few weeks. And what did they do? They went in that run, and I did not back them one time. So, there's coaches that blow smoke up your ass, and there's some coaches that are legit. He is legit, and I didn't listen to him. But, I look at the stats, and I do a stat profile each week with the yards per game diff and yards per play diff. Clemson's actually played the tougher schedule year to date. And basically, yards per play diff, which is my number one go-to stat, they're almost identical. 1.52 yards per play for Louisville, 1.67 yards per play. But look when we get into ACC play. Louisville has played a significantly tougher ACC schedule, but they're now down to 74 at minus 18 yards per game and 49 at plus 0.41 yards per play, where Clemson, yards per play diff, points per play diff, and yards per game diff in conference play in the country, they're number 3, 7, and 7. Clemson has also picked up the pace. In ACC action, they are actually number 24. That is conference action, but number 24 in the country, running 72.4 plays per game. And explosive plays, 20 yards or more, Clemson is number 3 with 33 conference plays of 20 yards or more. Louisville's defense is number 116 in the country. I like Clemson. I like Clemson team total over. Haven't really finalized my decision on the game, but that's the route I would go for the follower that asked.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. Another ACC question, Drew, of course, involving the U, who's got to take on Manny Diaz returning, right? To take on Duke now as the head coach. I remember this game a couple of years ago. I think Duke actually came in and won outright. They were a 9-point dog, and they absolutely trounced them. It was 45-21, and boy, we were all looking at Mario Cristobal like, you got to be kidding me. Duke almost pulled the upset against SMU last week. Miami did end up winning against Florida State, but they got to win by 3 touchdowns again, Drew. What are we doing here?
You know what, Joe? I was I remember that game as well. Now, granted, this is a very different Miami team than that one, at least in my opinion, offensively. Man, what a great storyline, though. You brought it up. Manny Diaz coming back to Miami. He wasn't really, shown that much love in South Florida, but he's got Duke playing really, really well. You bring up the SMU game. I mean, Duke was right in that, and what they were going off as double-digit underdogs. So. And they've covered 5 straight games. This is a Duke team that I remember what they went on the road to Northwestern in that game, and they won in overtime. And I'm like, man, this team is being a little bit underpriced in the betting markets. And sure enough, just like what Ralph was talking about, I really haven't been riding this run that they've been on, unfortunately. I'm not looking to lay the price with the U here, Joe. I'm really not. I think this back door might be open. This Miami defense, it still has its question marks to some degree. But at the same time, I mean, Cam Ward and what he's been able to do, I think Miami's going to make the playoffs. I think that they're going to be fun to watch going down the stretch. And but in this game, I'm going to look towards the Blue Devils. And, Joe, I don't know if you're going to come back around to me, but your question on or the the comment by Jim in terms of time starting.
Yes.
I don't think it has anything to do with the time change. That's another question. How come the U.S. still does the time change? I mean, that's one of the best things about living in Mexico. They don't do it down here.
Amen.
And how we haven't done that. We got an election coming up. How these politicians aren't putting that forward, I don't get. But just look at the schedule, Joe. It's Hawaii at Fresno State, and they choose to kick that off at 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific. Why wouldn't you take advantage of the 10 o'clock at night on the East Coast, particularly with Hawaii? And then you got Colorado State, Nevada. You're kicking that off at 5 o'clock Pacific, and you're going up against these big-time games, USC, Washington, Clemson, Louis. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, to go get a solo, if I was the AD or, that last game, Nevada, Colorado State, that's on CBS Sports Network. If I have anything, if I'm a producer there and I can move it back, you would actually get way meetings going late night, Joe, especially with the betting, people betting on these games.
Yep.
There would be way more eyeballs on these teams if they would take advantage of that, in my opinion.
I'm with you. It's a comedy of errors here. You can't be all things to all people, but I'm with you. Having a primetime audience, I would take that any day as opposed to trying to cater to a conference that's, on the East Coast time zone here that's going to have nothing to do with the teams out west. So it's going to be interesting to see ratings, and that'll all change, Drew, once the ratings come in. And if they aren't what they could have been, well, we'll have a different discussion scheduling, I'm sure, next year here. BP, we've got a couple of questions coming in. One of them on YouTube Shorts having to talk about, can Oregon pull off a win this weekend, I believe against Michigan here. And I believe that they're a 14.5 point favorite in this game here. I guess not the question of whether they can win, but are they going to cover by that number here this week?
Look, I mean, I said what I said about Michigan earlier. They're just not a good football team. We all expected that they would fall off, right, Joe? I mean, I think it's a question of motivation from the Oregon side. I mean, Michigan is a team. I mean, they've used 3 different quarterbacks this year. Why? Because none of them are any good, and that's the bottom line. I mean, normally, you know me, Joe. I'm always the one to make a case for a stinky underdog. Like, all right, the public's moved too far in the one direction. But the only argument I could make for Michigan is I feel Oregon has been slightly overrated by the odds makers week in, week out. I don't know if this is the week. I mean, when was the last time Michigan was a double-digit home underdog? It's been many, many years. I think I was reading this is the first time since 1990 that Michigan has been a home underdog 3 times in the same year. And it's not even, well, it will be November by the time this game kicks off. But I don't know. It would be Oregon or pass, I suppose. There, I think Michigan has just no answers. They're putrid.
Yeah, no, they are putrid. They do have at least some stability at the quarterback position. On whether or not that actually means anything is a whole different ball game, though. But Oregon seems to be cruising here. And we also had, let me see here, I believe we are good to go on the games. And, of course, I had mentioned it earlier, we've got people, including Ralph and Drew and Bryan Power over at WagerTalk.com that are locked and loaded. In fact, Ralph, what do you got for the folks on your page at WagerTalk.com as we head into a Week 10 in college football, Week 9 in the NFL, and, of course, NBA is here. College basketball is just around the corner. What do you got locked and loaded for us?
5% hockey play for tonight. A rare hockey play, 5% for me. I have a Friday night college football play loaded. I'll be loading my Saturday college football plays here in the next couple hours. And I have a game circled. It looks like it's going to be a 5% college football release. So make sure you check my page. A great time for a 7-day or a 30-day all access to get each and every one of those plays. Plus, I do a lot of early plays. This week, not so much, but I do a lot of early NFL and college football plays. So by getting an all access pass, you don't have to wait till Saturday to get the plays. If you sign up for a 7-day all access, you can list the days you want to start. And let's say on Monday, you say, I want Ralph for the weekend, starting Friday and all next week. As soon as you load a play for Saturday, you get that player package. So it's a great way to go. And Joe, I do have one question for you or Drew.
Sure.
You know, I'm down in Daytona Beach, so I was thinking about going up to Jacksonville for the cocktail party. Tickets are easy to be had. When I looked at parking, some of those parking lots around the stadium were $600 for a parking pass. Tickets were $150 for the game. I can't believe that.
Yeah. Drew, should you tell him or should I tell him?
Ralph, there's a little secret in the state of Florida, man. If you just drive around and you're out there, it's not that dangerous of an area around. Just kind of drive around, pick out, and park your car off the street for like game days. You'll be fine, man. Don't be paying any big bucks to park your car. That's a secret from a long-time Floridian, man. You'll be all right. Don't pay that. I mean, $400 for a parking spot? No way. Maybe like $20 to somebody parking their front lawn. That's what I would tell you to do.
Those lots, Ralph, nobody goes to the game. The party is in that lot. You're actually paying a ticket into a club that's actually a parking lot because nobody goes to the game in those parking lots. You've got open bar everywhere. It is the ultimate tailgate party. That's what you're paying for. You are not going to the game if that's the game. And to Drew's point, you can drive there and park anywhere you want and go to the game, but to get into those lots, oh my goodness, it's out of control. Bryan Power was there one year, I think, and probably lost half his soul in one of those parking lots at one time here.
Yeah. So you're saying to pay the $400 for the parking spot and skip the ticket, Joe?
You're damn exactly correct. There's no point going to the game. Those people in those lots don't care,
lose, guys. Okay,
that's exactly
the Gators are not winning games.
That's correct.
That's what we're saying.
Doesn't matter at all. Drew, what do you got locked and loaded over your page at Wager Talk?
Yeah, Joe, going to be in with the Friday night card. Fridays have been good. This is the start of the weekend. We're in a good run overall. I mean, this week, Joe, I'll tell you, man, I've had a couple one-score losses, man, so I feel like I'm due. I don't know if you've been tuning into the Conference USA midweek games, but the Sam Houston State, they were laying, 9.5, 10. They returned the interception for a touchdown. I thought I got the cover, and then they called it back. Not sure if you saw that one, but yeah, I was on that, and then took a couple losses last night by one score. But hey, it is what it is, guys. I feel like I'm due this weekend, and Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays have been good for a few weeks now. So yeah, going to be in here by the end of the day with the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday NFL cards. So check it out, DrewMartinWagerTalk.com, guys.
Pretty funny, Drew. I looked at the app and I thought it was all. I'm like, oh, the phone's busted. It says it's 3-2 in the third. Well, that can't be right. There's not. It's got to be a baseball game. I mean, they must have the score. No, 3-2 in the third quarter there was actually pretty funny. BP, what are you thinking? Locked, loaded, ready to go across the sports landscape this week?
Yeah, so over the next 24 hours, all of my NFL and college will be available. Most of the plays are locked and loaded in. Subscribers have them already. Last weekend was our first bad weekend of the football season. Still number one in college since the start of the 2024 season. Very proud of that. We're going to have at least 4 plays in college on Saturday, at least 4 plays in the NFL on Sunday. And if you're listening here live on Thursday, well, I do have a 4% best bet on the Jets-Texans game that is currently available at WT.buzz/BP. Your New York Jets, Joe Roderi.
God, I want to throw up even thinking about having to watch this game again here tonight. Thank God I don't have to watch the Yankees throw up all over themselves anymore. That's a good thing. But hey, don't forget, hit that like button. Oh, please. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We'll be back again tomorrow. Another 5 games plus your questions here in college football week 10 on behalf of Ralph, Drew, and Bryan Power. We appreciate the time, guys. Best of luck with the plays in this week 10 of the college football season. We'll see you again tomorrow. Good luck.